Hey, welcome back to the channel. So I want to take a little bit of a time today and talk about the A7C II. I recently had a chance to take it to the zoo, which I think is a perfect application for a camera like this. I'll talk some about some of the good points, some of the bad points, and why I ultimately decided it was probably not the right camera for me. I took 3 different lenses with me. I took the Tamron 28-200, the Tamron 10 to 20 APS-C lens, and the Sony 11mm 1.8. And I thought that those lenses would give me a kind of a wide variety of ranges. And also, those are kind of lenses I would normally have with me if I was out, in a situation like this. Now let's talk about some of the camera features itself. As I expected, the viewfinder came in really handy. It was nice and bright and sunny that day, and I was able to look at that viewfinder and get and see what I needed to see in order to get focus and my framing just right and all that. So the viewfinder came in super clutch. I personally like a viewfinder because I'm able to look through it and it provides an extra point of contact, to stabilize your shot. Magnification is adequate and it's bright enough, and it serves its purpose. I wish I had eye cup, but it doesn't have eye cup, so what are you going to do? The screen on the camera is about what you would expect. It's just not great. I mean, I wish they would put better screens in the cameras, but they don't. The main thing that really ticks me off about these screens is you're outside the zoo. Of course, you have sunglasses on. I have polarized sunglasses. You're taking pictures and videos, in landscape mode, and then you turn it over to portrait, and everything just disappears because you're wearing polarized glasses. So you have to keep taking your glasses on and off if you're using polarized, sunglasses. And that just becomes a huge pain. I wish they would fix that problem with these screens. Even if they're going to, keep the resolution the same and the brightness the same, at least fix it where you can use it with polarized glasses when you're turning the camera one way or the other. Now we can talk about the mode switch. I mean, this is a welcome addition. You're able to switch from video to photo to S&Q mode really quickly. The only problem I have with the implementation on this particular camera is just not very intuitive as it is in some of the other cameras. Like say the A7R5 or the A7IV. I mean, you can look at the camera and quickly be able to tell kind of where you are in the mode selection. With the A7C II, the icons are a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to read. You have to kind of tip the camera up to kind of look at and see where you are in the mode selection process. So it's a little, and maybe it's just, muscle memory thing. It could be all me. But it's a little bit harder to tell where you are, and it slows you down just a little bit. I'm sure it would get faster over time, but when I was just out using it for that day, it wasn't an issue, but it was just something that's like, oh, I don't know where I am. In a previous video, I made a lot to do about the grip of the camera. For the most part, all day I walked around with that Tamron 28-200. I didn't have any kind of extension grip or anything like that on there. All I used was the Peak Design cuff, and I was able to walk around with that combo pretty much all day just in my hand, no problems at all. So if you're going to be using a lens approximately that size, which is a fairly decent size lens, I don't think you're going to have any problems with the grip. I thought the grip was, even though small, wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. Here's another thing about the camera that I don't know that has been talked about just a whole lot. Like in the ZVE1, you're able to use clear image zoom. You're able to use the face and eye detect. And that's kind of a new feature that Sony came out with recently in their cameras, and it really is nice to have, especially if you're using like a little bitty 11mm lens. You're able to get just a little bit more reach out of your lenses. But I'm happy to report that you can use clear image zoom and keep your face and eye detection in the A7C II, and that is a major win in my book. And there is no annoying zoom rocker like on the ZVE1. Like, that thing just annoys the crap out of me. I was able to assign a custom button to zoom, and then you use a scroll wheel to zoom in and out a little bit. I think that function just works so much better and more intuitive than the zoom rocker. I just hate the zoom rocker. I don't hate the zoom rocker, I just hate how it's designed in the ZVE1. And fair enough. I like being able to use the crop mode while taking photos and videos. And that's something that you really can't use with the ZVE1 unless you go down into HD mode. And I really just kind of forgot how much I actually missed that. Like when I was taking pictures of those, gorillas and taking pictures of the lions, I mean, 200 was just not enough to cut it. It wasn't enough to get out there. So I was able to click over into crop mode. Now you're only getting like 14 megapixels, but that's still pretty good. And as long as you're not cropping in even more on top of that. So those lines, I was able to get out there to 300 and get some pretty decent shots of the lines. And I find just with my personal shooting, I'm always in and out of that crop mode. On my A7R5, on all the cameras I've ever had with crop mode, I'm in and out of that crop mode all the time. It's just become a way that I shoot, and I'm comfortable with it. And when a camera doesn't have that, I sorely do miss it. So I'm glad it's back, and I enjoyed that about the A7C II. So we can talk about photos a little bit. The photos I took all look great. I can't complain about any of them. So if you're using this for mainly photos, you're going to get a heck of a camera with the A7C II. The problem I had with it was with the video and mainly with the stabilization. Let's take the 28 to 200 for example. Now I obviously know that if you zoom the lens out to 200 and maybe even out to 300 with the crop mode, or maybe you're in a 4K 60, you're not going to be able to get a very stabilized image. It's just going to shake around a lot, and especially if you're not using a non-stabilized lens like I was that day. So I know it's going to hunt around a little bit, and that's what happened. But I was able to, brace myself up against the pole and take some pretty good footage that way. But even at 28 millimeters, I thought, well, maybe I want to test this active stabilization with this lens and see how it does at 28 millimeters. And it was just bad. It's just bad. I was hoping it to be a lot better than it was, but in my opinion, it wasn't very usable. So I put the Tamron 10 to 20, 2.8 on there. Again, the stabilization was just pretty bad. Now you could I used this lens all during the snake house content, okay? Now I could hold the lens steady and take pretty steady video that way, handheld. So if you're going to be doing something like that, it works out pretty good as long as you're not moving. If you're going to be moving or, plan on walking around and taking video or vlogging or something like that, the video is just not very stable, even using active stabilization. So I was kind of disappointed in that. And then we move over to the 11 millimeter 1.8, and this is kind of the reason that you bring this type of lens. I use this in the bat house, I guess you would say. And that 1.8, I mean, you can just see everything. It was great. It's so good in low light, and I was able to get really steady footage of the owls and the bats and everything in that particular enclosement. And but I took it outside and I started kind of walking around with it, and I expected the stabilization to work better with the 11 millimeter than it did. Like I'll show you some of that footage now. I mean, it looks better than the other two lenses, obviously. But then sometimes it would just do some weird stuff. And then I realized that the weird stuff is coming from rolling shutter. And that's what makes the stabilization in the A7C II worse. When you combine not so good stabilization with rolling shutter, you just get a bad combination there. And then I realized when I was kind of going over this footage, I've been in this situation before when I had the A7S III and the A7 IV at once. Like I always felt, as far as hybrid cameras, both were compromised. Like the A7S III only had 12 megapixels, so it wasn't very good for photos. It was fine. It was fine for photos, but you couldn't crop in, you didn't have APS-C mode, things like that. And the A7 IV was compromised in that you have pretty bad rolling shutter, and you have to do the 4K 60 crop thing, which kind of sucks, So I always felt that those two cameras were compromised in some way. Come forward to the day, and I have the ZVE1 and the A7C II, and I realized that I was in the same position that I was in the past. So I decided, you know what? it's time to send the A7C II back. It'll make a great camera for a lot of people, but when your expectations are high, you kind of just expect more out of your cameras than what that camera was providing. But come to think of it, there was only one camera that I've had recently that's really met all my expectations as far as like a hybrid camera goes. And that's the A7R5. It's one of the best cameras I've ever used. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.